everybody, welcome to stage one. My name is Dan and I'm very excited to introduce this next session. We're going to be diving into the relationship between human creativity and AI. And it's not about replacing designers with tools, but about exploring how AI can become a true collaborator in the design process. Our guest, Paddy Pike, he's truly brilliant. I met him a good few months ago after following him for a while. Hi, Paddy.
Hello.
I'm very, very excited for your session. Your stance and your position on AI is truly unique. This is not. There's a lot of conversations around AI, and this is different. I can guarantee the audience that. Paddy, welcome to the stage. I'm going to leave it and hand it over to you. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Dan.
For a bit of Q&A.
See you in a bit. Well, first, thanks Gravity Sketch for having me. Lovely to be here. If we could get the presentation up, that would be great to start. Cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my background and then get on to some projects. So I started design in school, which paired well with my love for maths and physics, as I could apply the theories to practical situations. And I really enjoyed CAD, which wasn't the coolest thing at the time, but loved it, and loved sketching and research, designing in general. So I'll quickly show you my journey from some of my first projects here to some of the more recent work. I studied mechanical engineering at Edinburgh University, and while I was there, I started an Instagram account where I would post 3 times a day, which massively developed my taste as I analyzed so much design. Started off with not really knowing what I was doing, just looking around, and then eventually getting more and more picky about what I liked. I would look on auction houses, gallery websites, online publications, anything really. I've got spreadsheets of websites I used to go through daily. And in my holidays, I started working with some designers like Tom Faulkner, Barbara Oscoby, and Sebastian Conran, where I just got a feel for the industry, really liked it, loved all the people I worked with, loved working in furniture and in products, and especially with Sebastian Conran, the more engineering side of how things are made. And then after uni, I started off as an intern at Peter McKitch, an interior design studio, where I was designing furniture for high-end residential interiors, things like chairs, tables, staircases, tiles, doors, rugs, fireplaces, anything for an interior. I love the variety. And then after 2 years there, I moved to Francis Sultana and David Gill, where I produced a collection of furniture, as well as developing new pieces for designers like Matteo Bonetti, Zaha Hadid, and many others. And it's there that I really love the creative freedom of collectible design. There's quite a lot of money to play around with, and there's a lot of crazy creative people with bonkers ideas, which I really enjoyed. I was always a fan of technology and 3D modeling, and so I bought a VR headset to test it out, just to see if it could be useful for my projects, maybe play some games. And I used to mainly use Rhino, which I still use quite a lot, and then heard about Gravity Sketch back in 2020, so not too early, but still felt like it was a very new thing. And I was just obsessed with how intuitive the software was and still is. There were updates coming out weekly. There's no million button interface, but it's just all really intuitive, all seemed really natural. But we all hopefully know about lots of the benefits of Gravity Sketch. And yeah, it felt like I was just at the forefront of design with all these new updates coming out and just putting this weird thing on your head. Still find it a bit odd, but I like odd things, so there you go. I played around with it. There was a lot of just discovering, trying out new shapes, new textures. I really enjoyed the ergonomic man, the mannequin, and I just developed all sorts of different things. As you can see here, just different shapes. To me, it was so cool that you could just play around with virtual clay. You can enlarge the piece, you can go into crazy detail, you can duplicate, undo, scale, but all with the natural movement of your two hands in 3D space, like a sculptor. So now I'll show you a few projects that show various different ways to sculpt pieces, to show the journey to how I got to Gravity Sketch and its uses. So this is me making my tide sculpture a few years ago now, making it by hand from clay, which I really enjoy and still do when I can. Not as much as Gravity Sketch, but working with physical materials is still great. And then here is the piece cast in bronze, and hopefully you can see some of the natural movement you get from working with the physical material. That's cast in bronze with a sort of dark brown patina. Then this is my mammoth plant pot, which started off as a very basic sketch, top left. And then I modeled it in Rhino. You can probably see how basic that is. It fit the function, so it was fine, but it just didn't have the natural movement that either working with clay or working in Gravity Sketch has. Still very happy with the end result though. It was quite a big piece, so a lot of its, for me, its attraction came with its size. And it has a breathable base, so it doesn't get overwatered. Those are the holes in the bottom. And then I worked on this coat hook design. And as coat hooks are much smaller than the other pieces I just showed, it gets quite fiddly. Whether you're using, well, no matter what material, if you're working with your hands, it's quite hard to get those kinds of shapes. I'm sure some can, but I'm not an expert sculptor yet. And if you're working in Rhino, it's quite hard and time-consuming to get this kind of movement in the form. But in Gravity Sketch, I would just enlarge the model, and work on certain sections at a time, making it much easier. And then here is the final piece, cast in bronze with again a dark patina that I like. And so then I've always been interested in technology, as I said, and I've been using AI for a while to do things like research, checking over emails or long bits of writing, checking Excel formulas, the kind of things that hopefully most people do these days. And then I found a good text-to-image AI software and thought it'd be useful to visualize some of my ideas. So I've got spreadsheets and lists of random ideas I jot down, but most of them are just in my head and aren't actually in any kind of visual form, and most of them are a bit weird. So I'll just show you a few examples of some of my earlier, not projects, but just random thoughts, just thoughts put into visual, basically. I do a lot of photography, so I have quite a keen eye for things like lighting and shading and materials visually. And the outcome I got from these early renders was, to me, mind-blowing. Credit to the software, not to me. Like in this balloon chair, trying to get that from trying to 3D model that and render it would be possible, but very, very time consuming. Whereas this was pretty quick to do. Then a sort of weird bubble chair. Getting textures like realistic wood was much easier, which is one of the great benefits of using AI. Quite realistic fur. I can probably do better than that now, but it was an early piece. So the way that I look at AI is that it has these sort of unpredictable parts to it, but it's the unpredictability of it that gives it its character and gives the materials their complex and realistic qualities. And that's what I really enjoy. And I think that's what people see in it, that they do enjoy. It's just about understanding that so you can then use it to your own benefit. So the way I interact with AI is very similar to how I interact with a supplier or a material, a process, a colleague, any of these kinds of things or people, because they all have their own character that you need to understand. so that you need to find out its strengths and weaknesses and limitations so you can maximize the output. If you don't know what someone can do, then it's really hard to get them to do the thing you want. So a good analogy for this, in my experience, is making rugs. I make a lot of rugs, I design a lot of rugs, and the amazing guys in India make them. And there are some things that you want to have control over, and some things you don't necessarily want to have control over. For example, with a rug, you want to know its size, because if you order it at 2 by 3 meters and it comes in at 1 by 7, then you, the customer, whatever, might not be very happy. But when discussing things like the color, yes, if you want it to be a specific red, that's good. But when you use vegetable dyes, you get a certain depth in the color, and that's what brings it to life, in my opinion. That's what can bring parts of it to life. And even in the shape, with the way it's woven, that's the character of the weaver coming through in the rug. And a really skilled weaver won't ever get it exactly the same as your drawing. There's always going to be slight imperfections from your design, slight different changes, but it's a bit like a brushstroke on a painting. There are slight imperfections in it that give it its character, which make it amazing. So I will go through some of the different projects I've done and produced with the help of AI a bit further on from the earlier ones. Here's a staircase. Yeah, I developed this sort of ceramic style finish that I put on a few different things like that, and this house. And that was done by inputting various images of ceramics so that you can tell it what you want it to look like, but then going crazy with the form. I'll go through that in more detail later with an example. Here's a bench thing in the same ceramic style, and first sofa, sort of acrylic chair. I guess this might be painted wood. And this actually, you can see perhaps in the chair that the legs and the backrest don't quite make sense. But for me, that's fine. This isn't produced in reality. If I were to produce it in reality, I wouldn't make this exact thing. I would just use it as inspiration, which is why AI can be so useful for for generating ideas. So useful. It might not be the overall finalized idea that it produces, but it's just nudging you in 1,000 different directions, and you can pick and choose which ones you like. I thought this was an interesting ceramic shape. This one, which I thought looked like a fireplace and was actually the inspiration for a collection I then went on to make off the back of this, which I called the Vulcan Fireplace Collection. This is a chair, and you'd have a fire underneath to keep you warm as you sit in it. And it's ideas like this that I currently find really interesting, because it's becoming so much easier to visualize ideas by using AI. And so because it's easier to visualize ideas, I think the focus is shifting from something being beautiful aesthetically to it having some interesting function or helping the world in some way or using some new recycled material. And so I've been trying to focus more on the other side of design, the function, the roots of the material, etc., because it's just quite easy to visualize something well. Producing it can get more tricky, but that's not the focus of this talk. So I've been developing this furniture inspired by vintage parchment and paper, and I use the text to image prompts of for these pictures anyway, things like paper, parchment, concrete floor, white wall, because they're the generic materials that I want here. But what I didn't do when I started was to give it too many prompts on the form, because I wanted to just generate random shapes. Like you can see the top left one here. To me, it looks a bit like a skate park, like a miniaturized weird skate park, or the top right looks like a ramp. And I didn't end up using those particular components, but they were interesting to me. and I use them in the development of other designs. But I really like the depth that AI is getting in the material, and it's inconsistent. It's got a lot of character coming through in it, which is the limitation that I like. Like I like not being able to control that, and I understand that I can't control that. I can't control, to some extent, which bits are really light and really dark, and where the dirty bits are, and whether a line goes perfectly in a perfect circle or curve, or whether it veers off a bit. For me, that's AI's character coming through. So I developed these into things like this, which are a bit more furniture looking. And it's quite an iterative process to get to this point, because it's not like I would just say to it, parchment, paper, chair, and it comes up with this. It's a bit more of a conversation, hence why this talk is Conversations with AI, because I might get some results like these initial ones, and then I might get some that are halfway towards these ones, and I'll take the images, put them into Photoshop, change things, remove legs, change the color, increase the lighting in the background, do all sorts of things to it, whatever I see fit. And then put those images the sort of mutated images I've made, put them back into AI and get the AI to adjust them slightly to be more realistic, to end up with something more like this. And so it really is like a bit of teamwork. It's much like how if you're working with a supplier who wants to physically make these chairs, they might say, oh, we can kind of do that, but actually the radius here has to be slightly different because that's how the material bends, or it'll crack if you do that. So it has to be more like this. It's that conversation, but it's with the AI software as opposed to a person in a workshop. Although the person in the workshop can also be in this conversation too. More fun. And there's a quote I found by this guy called Stephen Covey, which I thought was quite fitting. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. There are so many people who ask me about AI and who ask me how I get my results, and they say, "Oh, it doesn't work for me. Like I've tried the AI and it doesn't work." But I'm confident that if you can fully understand how AI works, then you can get much better results for your projects. Much better. It's just the mindset of it's not working, I think is wrong. It should be we don't work together, because it is a relationship. Like using Gravity Sketch. Gravity Sketch is a much more intuitive. So now I'm going to this is the chair from that collection, and this is where Gravity Sketch comes in into my process, because I might get an image of a chair, but if I want to present it to a client or to show it to a manufacturer or to make tech drawings, whatever it is that's the next in the process, I quite often need to understand the 3D visual of the chair, not just the one image. And although AI, you can actually get AIs now that will take an image and create you a 3D model, this is where I like to have my input. I like to take the inspirational image I found I've created in AI and then make my own 3D model from that. And that's where I have my character really showing in the final piece with like the curves that I've decided. And so here we have the screenshots from Gravity Sketch above and the AI renders below, where I've put in the shape from Gravity Sketch, and I've asked AI with some settings, use this exact shape, but then use the other reference images to create the materials and the textures and the lighting, and that's how we get these end results. And here are just some other angles of the same. And now I'm going to show you how I like to be influenced by, in a weird way, by other art forms. So I really love music. I love playing music. I love dancing, all sorts. And what I did is I've 3D modeled this chair, and I've recorded the 3D modeling in Gravity Sketch. You've probably seen a few other people do this at the festival already. But I did it to music. which didn't really change the outcome very much, but it was just quite fun. And that video is going to be played after this talk. But here is a very small snippet of it, which I think won't have any sound, but you can see a little bit of silly dancing while I have the visual of the chair above and I have the modeling of the chair below. I'm not going to play too much of this, but we can move on. Oh. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then also, this is my Instagram account where I post my new collections, my new designs, and I'm going to post actually right now this new collection, in case you want to see any of the other pieces that have been created. And that is it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you very much, Paddy. Absolutely fascinating. As I said before, like, you're truly using AI in ways that is unique, to be quite honest. You know, there's a lot of conversations going on around AI at the moment. That in itself is not new, but how you're using it in the way that you're conversing with AI is really quite amazing. So thank you very much. Before we bring on our guest speaker to ask a couple of questions, that's Gustav from the last session. I've just got a question of my own, if that's all right.
Please, yeah.
It's really clear, and I think what's really special about the way that you work is your experience, expertise within photography, but also your physical craft, the understanding of depth of material. You used that term a few times. You talked about the nuances of the dyeing process. You showed when you were out in India creating carpets. And I'm curious, how important is, or do you feel, your understanding of that physical creation process to how you prompt your AI tools, partners, collaborators?
Well, it's a really interesting question, because my answer is a bit annoying. I think that for me, it's really important because that's what I really enjoy. But I would never say to anyone who doesn't understand how things are made in the same way that I do, that that's a negative for them. Because for me, all art forms are just about showing your character through whatever art form you have. And so you could be blind and create the most beautiful textured material because that's how you see it, you know? So for me, it's really important to understand how things are made, because that's what gets me going. I love discovering a new material, a new maker. I love understanding why wood looks like that, why certain fabrics have that kind of depth. That's what gets me really excited. And so that's the direction my projects tend to go in. But someone could easily make something much more exciting than I'm doing with zero understanding of that particular material. Does that make sense?
In a way. So, I mean, does it change the nuance in which the way that you prompt? For better or
the
for
way
worse?
I prompt. Sorry, yes. It doesn't when it comes to materials that have already been made, but it does when I'm trying to come up with new materials.
Got it.
Yeah. So if I'm using oak wood, I'll just use images of oak wood that I've already seen as a reference image in the AI. But if I'm trying to think of a new material on the spot here, quite difficult. Some kind of textured jelly or something of which there's no pictures online, then I might need to take a picture of jelly and put it into Photoshop and give it a certain depth. And to do that, you might want to give it highlights and shadows to create that kind of depth in the material. And for that, having an understanding of the material does help. But that's not in the prompt. In general, the prompts are for things that the AI already knows, unless you train your own AI, which gets a lot more complicated. But yeah.
No, nice one. Right, I'm going to bring on Gustav to the stage. So welcome, Gustav. You guys who are watching keenly will be familiar with Gustav from the last session. I'd love to open out into a discussion. Really, there's a few questions as well from the community, from the messages, which I'll try and interweave into the conversation. But yeah, Gustav, what do you think? How was it for you watching?
Amazing stuff. So impressed with the presentation and what you have accomplished. Great work.
Thanks, Gustav.
I was interested in, like, you were saying that basically, because you were coming from engineering as well, and that it's easier and easier to generate ideas, and it's more about, you were talking about more about finding new materials and such, or the intriguing stuff about that.
Yeah.
Would you say that the typical designer, the one that does aesthetically pleasing things, are becoming obsolete compared to like the programmer or the engineer when it comes to making products, because ideas are generated by AI?
I think maybe the short answer is yes. If you're someone who is just making something look pretty and it's purely aesthetics, I think that there will always be jobs for that, for sure. But I think that the number of jobs will go down and the skill level required to get a good job in that will go up, because AI is just replacing so much of that. Whether that's a good thing or not, I have no idea. But I think that is happening already.
Yeah, definitely. But
yeah.
When coming from, like, if you work as a freelance artist or if you're doing stuff in your own name, do you think that the AI uses like a general, everything is coming to be a bit more like each other while everyone is using AI? Or do you think that that's just a matter of people, they need to learn to prompt better? Do you get what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying.
It's harder to find your own identity.
I think it is. If you don't understand how to use AI, then you will generally get similar results, more similar results to what other people are getting. But if you understand it at a very deep level, like if you are able to train your own AI, which will become easier and easier as time goes on, you can then purposefully train it to not look like other people's things. The possibilities are basically endless. You could ask an AI to train a model, but purposefully not make a wheel round and not make wood colored, etc., in whatever way you might want. You can just don't think outside the box, but think around the balloon, whatever.
Something that I picked up early on in what you were saying, which might feed into this, and I found it quite interesting, is you spent a lot of time. You spent 3 times a day you were posting online on Instagram, and which has an incredible following, by the way. So congratulations on that. But it's almost like you were curating your own style. And do you feel like that actually feeds into how you now begin to converse with AI? You've got a certain expectation.
Never thought about that. Yeah, actually, I think I've never thought about it like that, but I think it does. Like I started my Instagram account before I started working for designers full time, and what I found in my experience is that people who go and work for a specific designer will so often take off their ethos, their aesthetic, things like that. But because I didn't do that, I just started off by looking at anything I could find online. I mean, when I started out, I was literally Googling furniture design, like as basic as it gets. And so I was just looking at all sorts of things. So I didn't really have a particular person to follow, or I didn't buy the same magazine every week and just look at that. It really was just a complete scattergun approach, which is perhaps why now my projects, although they don't have the same visual character running through them all, I like to think they do have a bit of my character in them, but I don't have a specific style. I think maybe that is part of it. It's a good point. Thank you.
And maybe to go on from that, actually, to just pick up from what Holly was asking in one of the chats, there is, as your AI communication skills have developed, do you find your approach to design has changed?
Yeah, I think it has. Mainly in what I was saying earlier about the focus shifting from aesthetics to function. That's been the main shift in recent months and maybe in the last year, because I've just from all the Instagramming that I've been doing, it was so much research. It was hours and hours a day. Almost even more work as I started to do it more, because although I then had all these different sites I was looking at, I would just become more and more sort of snobby in particular about what I was posting. So instead of just finding something vaguely cool and posting it, I would have to search for so long to find something that was new and different. And having looked at so much stuff, as I'm sure you guys all have, you sort of think, God, what can we do that's different? And so you have to really sort of reinvent the wheel and think outside the box. And I still struggle with it a lot, but it's just that approach. That's the approach of design that's changed. Is instead of going, oh, how can I make a pretty chair for this client? It's more just forget pretty chairs. Don't even think about chairs. Let's think completely back to the building blocks and think about, like, why do we need chairs? Can we sit on something else, etc., etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to open out this question, and actually, Gustav, would love your thoughts, because I assume, Gustav, you're also using AI as part of your workflow now. Would that be right?
I do. Not in the same level as Paddy, not even close, but...
I'm curious to ask you both this question, because both Delek from the chat and Daniela, actually, our co-founder who was hosting the last session, both asking which AI platforms are you using, and then to go on from that, how are you keeping consistency? We'd love both your thoughts actually on that. But Paddy, perhaps yourself first.
Sure. Well, I use things like ChatGPT and Gemini for text ones, but I assume the question is more focused on the image stuff. And I use one called, the main one I use is called Focus, Foocus, that my friend Max showed me. And it's, I've actually got it on my computer, so it's not in the cloud. It doesn't cost me anything. It's open source. It's really, really good. It's a little bit techie, but I like that. And you have quite a lot of control over the image. It takes a bit of time to learn it, but definitely worth it. And I've actually started using some new video AI software, which is really, really exciting. It's completely crazy. I haven't yet got to the point where it's good enough to release anything, but that's mind-boggling, especially for the film sector. A bit scary. And you, Gustav?
Well, I'm using ChatGPT as well for text and such, and that's basically the first and foremost part that I use AI for, and not so much when it comes to imagery, unless it's like for a mood board or anything like that. But I'm getting super inspired by watching your presentation, and I just wrote down Focus AI. Look into that.
Let me know if you need a hand.
Oh, I will.
A related question here from Raphael is, the AI, is it producing 2D images, or is it starting to produce 3D? I think you just mentioned that you're starting to look at video AI softwares too, but I assume Focus, is it 2D that's primarily focused on?
Yeah, that's 2D. But there are other 3D ones. I've got it on my to-do list to look into one of them. I can't remember what it's called, but it takes a 2D image and proposes a 3D model from that 2D image.
Yeah,
which is pretty. You know about that, Dan?
Not really, no.
I'll send you a link.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. But then, again, I've got another question I'd love to put to both of you. It's actually, sorry, Gustav, I'm bringing you in here. But
no, go ahead.
It's only because I didn't actually get to see your presentation, Gustav, but obviously we've chatted before, and I will be watching it back. But what you're doing in VR and Gravity Sketch is really powerful. Likewise, yourself, Paddy, really powerful work in VR, and then my question is around how do we utilize AI as a part of that, and more so because you touched on it, Paddy. Where do we feel like it's going? Like, what's the next evolution of that 3D asset to AI? Where do you feel like it should head, perhaps?
God, you should be the one to answer that one, Dan. But I think one way that I think it could be used is in things like 3D printing, how the computer will understand where to put the supports in for a 3D model, understanding how to connect surfaces. I think I mentioned this to you guys at Gravity Sketch the other day. Things like if you have two different models and you want to join them together, currently in Gravity Sketch, you sort of move the points towards each other, which can be a little bit time consuming when all you want is a curved surface. And if you had an AI button that just goes join surfaces, that would be quite useful. So maybe for building things, building things where the building development is vaguely repetitive or obvious.
Yeah.
But I don't really know. This is a tricky one.
Well,
can you help me out?
I see that a lot of as you said, that you're looking more into function than actual form. So do I in terms of designing. When you're like trying to figure out a new piece, it's more about finding that perfect little solution that is interesting more than the actual just aesthetics of the entire piece. And I found myself looking for those components, those tiny like little things that no one has ever used in a furniture before, that is being used on construction sites or in like large scale manufacturing. Finding those parts to involve into my design, just because it makes it stick out and way more fun and interesting. I would love to see some sort of tool that helps me to find those things, because it's a lot of looking for solutions that I not yet know what I'm looking for, you know.
Yeah.
Just we want something with this kind of connection, and it should be this big, and it should be out of metal. Find it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
One more from me, actually, because I just remember this coming up in a prior conversation. I thought it was fascinating. And Paddy, what would be your advice to somebody? Because I think there's 100 people in the audience who have maybe tried an AI or a conversation with AI, albeit brief, and it just didn't output what they wanted, and it was just like, well, I tried what you tried, and it didn't work like yours. What would be your advice to them?
I would say watch some YouTube videos of people using AI and see what their workflow is. Maybe ask AI, a different AI like ChatGPT, what kind of prompts should I use to get this result? Be overly precise with your questions when talking to AI. When you assume that it's going to make something look like what you want, you're probably getting it wrong, in the same way that it is probably getting it wrong when it assumes what you want. So be extremely precise with your wording as much as possible. And just keep learning. Learn how it works, learn what went wrong. Instead of just going, oh, it didn't work, try and work out why it didn't work and see if you can improve that broken link in the chain.
Nah, fascinating. And I don't want to round off too early here, but, so I do want to, Gustav, if you've got any further thoughts or questions before I round off.
I'm just, I'm as not a designer that is not as fluent in AI as you are. I'm just taking notes. I'm super impressed, and I'm gonna look back into this and try to take learn something from it.
Yeah, absolutely. A student like all of us, and like so many people in the audience too. But yeah, as I said, Paddy, just before I round off, I think what's really brilliant and what I'm seeing in your presentation is it's a conversation with AI. It's a unique conversation too. It's almost a human-like conversation, which is really interesting to see, and the results are obviously brilliant. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you for sharing some of what you do, some of what your work, and also Gustav, thanks for sharing your time with us as well to add your thoughts to the conversation too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone at Gravity Sketch. I cannot sing its praises enough. Absolutely love it. Really do. It's a pleasure to be here.